Hi, and welcome to the developer log. Since this is the last of these before Mechanic Miner leaves early access next week, we thought we'd make this developer log about how you have all helped us make Mechanic Miner a more enjoyable experience from start to finish. First off, thank you for your diligence in hunting down bugs, providing feedback, and for creating a massive amount of content in our Steam workshop. Before launching Mechanic Miner into early access, we had a vision for both how the development process would look and for how the finished game would play. Due to your feedback, however, both of these things were changed, and that's a good thing. With your help, we identified 3 key areas that our development has focused on since our game came out in early access: bugs in the game not being fun enough, and onboarding not being good enough. In terms of complexity, bugs made for the simplest of these key areas. 2 of our programmers spent an entire month on just going through a list of bugs and fixing them one by one. There were more bugs in the first builds of the game than we'd expected, and every once in a while a patch would lead to hotfixes to new or returning bugs. All told, we've fixed over 450 bugs, all thanks to the help of you, our community. The second key area, the game not being fun enough to play, was more of a complex challenge for us to solve. Our original vision for the game was for a more hardcore, old-school game experience. With that vision in mind, it made sense to have a game that was slightly more tedious in terms of having to backtrack to objectives, to grind to be able to progress, and just in general have a higher difficulty of gameplay. The problem with that was the difference in expectations from us and from the players. While there are always people who appreciate more challenging games, we quickly realized that those were not the main part of our players. We spent some time behind the scenes, iterating internally on how we could solve these problems of different expectations for the game. Ultimately, we decided that while it went against our original vision for Mechanic Miner, it was more important that we made the game enjoyable to play for everyone. Another aspect of the game not being fun enough was in terms of the diversity in both biomes for the players to experience and in terms of combat. Simply put, the original monsters in the game were boring to fight, and they did not behave differently enough to make fighting them entertaining to our players. It was also not fun for players to have to either escape combat or rebuild, sometimes from the ground up after encounters, and then double back and grind for materials so they could rebuild. Ultimately, we wanted the story mode to reflect what can be done in-game, and reworking the story mode allowed us to solve both the problem of the game not being fun enough and showing players what can be done in-game at the same time. That's why we ended up with a story mode of more varied monsters, areas, and more challenges. Crucially, those challenges are less brutal now, and the repair tool can restore broken pieces on your vehicle. Also, we've now placed resources for the player to replenish their inventory more strategically, so that they do not need to double back too far to grind. An important part of making the game less brutal overall was to better compartmentalize where monsters would spawn and attack the player. The game now has a significantly less hostile overworld, which lets the player breathe and build or rebuild when necessary. The last key area was onboarding the player. This aspect of our re-evaluation of what the game should be consists of 3 parts: the game's tutorial, unlocks, and managing player knowledge. The tutorial itself has not changed as much as the rest of the story mode quests, but it has been improved, so that it shows the player in a more informative way how certain of the in-game systems work. As you can see from one of our previous developer logs, we've changed quite a lot about how the player unlocks new technology and new augmentations. The new process, while technically giving less freedom to the player, also means that the player is more likely to have the tech they need at any given time, without having to grind as much to unlock new stuff. The last part of onboarding that we've worked on improving is player knowledge. By using a more on-the-rails system of unlocking new tech, we've already started improving player knowledge by taking away the risk of unlocking stuff that might not be useful to the player yet. As you can see from another previous developer log, our approach to managing the player's knowledge of the in-game mechanics also included making the way connectors work be more intuitive. In fact, we've added a few more changes to how cables look when connected correctly or incorrectly since then. We've also improved the guide that used to only exist on our website and put it into the actual game. That way, you can always look up any part of building in the game that you might have problems with. We really appreciate all the time and energy you've all put into playing and talking about Mechanic Minor. As you can see, we've taken your feedback into account. Thanks to your enthusiasm, we've been able to make our game that much more fun to play.